Celebrating 50 years of ANA. Conversations on the past, present, and future of self-determination.
Ha Mitakuapi, Patrice Kunesh Imachiapi. Hello, my relatives. I'm Patrice Kunesh, the Commissioner of the Administration for Native Americans in the Administration for Children and Families at the Department of Health and Human Services. And I am so thrilled today to be joined by Ryan Wilson, who is a tremendous advocate for Native languages and Native cultures his whole entire life. So we're going to have a conversation today in honor of ANA's 50th anniversary. The Administration for Native Americans was established by Congress in 1974 through the Native American Programs Act. Ryan and his legacy of language and tribal advocacy was really a champion of this work, especially the Esther Martinez immersion program and other tremendous language support programs and services. So today we're going to learn about what brings Ryan to this space of language revitalization. But first, I'd like to talk to Ryan about what brings him into just this whole world of national leadership and bringing our youth and our families along into the space of language, culture, tradition, and how do we keep it alive. So welcome.
Thank you.
Good. So I think you've done a lot of tremendous work with children and families, especially through the Boys and Girls Club. And I would just love for you to give us a little bit about your background, your Oglala Lakota, and what brings you to Washington, D.C.
Well, we're here to celebrate the National Congress of American Indians, their Executive Winter Council session. And it's brought tribes from all over Indian country, and it's awesome that you bring up Native youth, because there's hundreds of Native youth here that took to the Hill this week, that participated in leadership trainings and workshops and engaged, and also got an opportunity to meet congressional leaders, administration leaders, and I always like to think of it as developing a comfort zone and a sense of ownership in our nation's capital here.
And future leaders.
Exactly.
Right? Future leaders. So, Ryan, I understand that you were a catalyst in founding one of the oldest Native youth organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about how you did that? And I believe it was the Northwest Indian Youth Conference. What is that all about?
Well, I wasn't a founder, but that was founded on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation, way back, and it preceded Unity, and we're big fans of Unity. But out of the Northwest Indian Youth Conference, they were kind of the impetus for really getting young people involved in tribal leadership as well. And so they'd always have trainings, community action things, experiential learning, stuff that was kind of anomalous, to what they were doing. And
back in that day,
yeah,
in that time.
Yes, like they even did voter registration.
Right.
They did when we had that great campaign to replace Slade Gordon, the senator of the state of Washington. These youth registered a couple thousand voters,
Wow.
and to engage in civics and to understand what it is and to understand Indian affairs in a sense of you come to a conference not to be entertained, not to just have fun activities, but also what is your role, what is your responsibility, what's your kinship to your tribe, your band, your family, and what is it still to have a tribe left anymore?
Right.
And why did all our tribes that still exist today choose to be around each other and to have homelands? How do you defend those?
Right.
And really incredible leaders over the years we integrated into the agenda so they could talk to these young people as well and inspire them. And I'm really proud of that work that we did.
They're really inspiring. I saw some of the posters in the hallway of them expressing some of the big challenges in Indian country, and as a youth facing opioid use and alcohol addiction and some of the homelessness. They're the future leaders, so they're also going to be the future problem solvers. So we're here to support their growth and development, but also we need to hear their voices, right?
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing when we talk to young people is to take responsibility also, and to understand what's a symptom, what's a cause, and what are solution-based actions that they can take as young people as well. So not to just say this opioid crisis and this overwhelming sense we have, because we're burying young tribal members every day across Indian country from these overdoses and what's happening. But why are those drugs there? Why are our young people feeling that that's a pathway for them to express themselves or to engage in? And
they need to see some hope, right?
Exactly.
I do think NCAI, the National Congress of American Indians, really does show the strength of Indian country collectively, that we're going to build this future in a much better way. Well, also at NCAI yesterday, we had a workshop, a learning session around Native languages, and you very kindly presented ANA with a vase. And that vase was a recognition of ANA's 50 years, being here, being an advocate, being an investor in Native communities. And you spoke some really beautiful words, and maybe you could share a few of those today. But you know ANA much better than I do. I started with my law career at the Native American Rights Fund under an ANA grant, but I just knew it as a funding source, not as a transformational power within Indian country. So tell me a little bit about how you came to know about ANA.
Well, I think the story of ANA, it can't fully be told until you really get to the beginning, what preceded ANA. And the you know, I was thinking about it walking over here. Our nation was at its low point when President Kennedy was assassinated. And right before that, he had attended the National Congress of American Indians. They had a convention over here. And one of the words he was sharing was that there's much to do in Indian affairs. And then that dark day, you know, in November when he was lost, from that tragedy, this new effort rose up with President Johnson and the passage of power to him and what he wanted to do. And the story is they understood that Kennedy wanted to tackle poverty. But the massive and prodigious legislator that President Johnson was when he was in the Senate, he actually understood how to make a legislative vehicle happen to attack that. And so from there became his declaration of war on poverty and unconditional war on poverty. And from there, the legislative vehicle was the Economic Opportunity Act in 1964. So we, Indian country, we have two awesome birthdays. That we have ANA turning 50 and OEO 60 from when that happened. And the beautiful thing about that act was that it opened up funding in all of the departments, but it kept the Office of Economic Opportunity under the executive wing and then the executive offices. So to dramatize that point, could you imagine in today's dollars what they were doing with leverage with all of the departments to get money out to Indian country and how that went? And then years... It
was up to that point only the BIA, right?
Exactly. They had a complete monopoly on Indian affairs. And the paternalism at that time, this is not BIA bashing, it was just the reality of that time. So if Indian country thinks there's a paternalism now, they have no idea what it was back then. And interesting, the Merriam report that everybody cites all the time, the fundamental finding in there was the problem with Indian affairs, with Indian administration, was we didn't have enough professionals to administer our own. So this is in the 1920s. You fast forward to the war on poverty, we still didn't. So imagine all of your schools being run by non-Indians, by states, all of the bureaucratic key positions in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, non-Indians, all of the administrative positions in your tribal communities.
Making all the decision points.
All of the decisions.
Not even having any connection to the people, to the community.
And all of our universities, massive barriers for enrollment, for support. So what Dr. Jim Wilson, who is my great uncle, my grandpa's little brother, what he realized was the removal of barriers was the creation of opportunities. So
that's a simple equation, right?
It is, and it's so interesting to me because look at the executive order that the Biden administration just rolled out. It's the removal of barriers to the creation of heightened self-determination and less interference in getting the resources to Indian country, but opening up those universities and creating Indian law programs, creating Indian education programs, administration, leadership programs, and not just at any colleges, but the finest in America, because he knew Indians were bright, he knew they were highly intelligent, and then investing in that created an atmosphere where we could take over our own programs, where we could get a heightened level of self-rule, and we could engage better and speak for ourselves and tell our own stories. And that's empowerment. That's not
quite a vision.
Yeah.
That's quite a vision. We heard yesterday from John Echohawk, the executive director of the Native American Rights Fund, that he was the first Indian to attend the University of New Mexico School of Law under a scholarship from OEO. And I also attended law school at the University of Colorado under a Department of Education scholarship for Native students. So what an incredible trajectory that law created.
And I don't know if John mentioned that, but at that generation, they really literally viewed themselves as responsible for lifting all boats like a rising tide. They wanted everybody to have access.
I don't know if he realized it then, but he certainly did soon thereafter when he created the Native American Rights Fund.
Yes.
So Jim Wilson has a pretty amazing history with ANA. Was he not the first ANA commissioner?
Not quite. When the Nixon administration came in and Don Rumsfeld was actually his boss, and then they started putting the framework together, you know, as the attacks came more fierce on the war on poverty programs, and Nixon wanted his own stamp on self-determination and also how that would look. The program started getting dispersed to all four corners of the federal government, and the idea then was to create that Native American Programs Act and ANA, and in between those times he left and came back to Pine Ridge. But in the authorizing language, it specifically cites OEO in the Native American Programs Act. So I always say this is a recalibrated continuation.
That's right.
And ANA has done a miraculous job because it's really hard. If you were to ask mainstream communities, non-Indian communities, point to a OEO program now in the federal government, you know, but it's really difficult for them to do that. This persevered, and it's, as I said yesterday, it's a small agency with a mighty big mission, and it's not a, I don't view it, and a lot of my colleagues, we don't view it as a grant program. We view it as an idea program, because the number one most critical thing is our creativity, our imagination, our viewpoints in organizing and planning, and what gets carried on into the future in Indian country in our own tribes. And how does that imaginative behavior get seed money to grow and to have a start, to come to fruition?
Well, I love the way you phrase that. I've heard even our own community partners, that's how I consider our relationship with the recipients of our funding, actually partners in the community, building things from the ground up. They called ANA a catalyst because we gave them the opportunity to take their big idea and just make it bigger and spread it across. This was an Alaska Native community, and it really did take off, but it was a catalyst that spurred and developed this amazing workforce that really is connected to the land and to the environment. And I love that you say that ANA is an idea, because recently, from my perspective of how Indian affairs, Native affairs ought to be regarded, and the stewardship that I feel I have of our funding is really a sense of these funds belong in the community. These funds belong to those Native peoples doing those work, and we're just a pass-through. And so what we've done is we've revised our entire Notice of Funding Opportunity application to streamline and just kind of reduce all the, or eliminate all the excessive verbiage to tell us what we really want to know is what is your biggest, boldest idea of how to solve the issues or challenges or remove the barriers in your community. And I think that we're going to have this stunning response to see, oh my goodness, it's about food sovereignty or child welfare or language or about the environment or about lifting up grandmothers. It's just an amazing opportunity, I think, to really hear from Indian country with these new fundings. As well as, you know, rather than giving out funding in increments, provide the funding up front so then they can decide we need to invest in this or we need to support that or how to get a whole new fresh idea off the ground. And I think that respects and honors tribal self-determination, self-governance, and actually puts the decision-making back in the community.
Well, you're explaining the continuation of the founding, and then at a heightened level, and you're also explaining this multiplier effect. You know, that's so crucial to us. So, when this all started, there were no Indian desks in any agencies outside of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and look at now. Every department, every agency, you know, in the whole federal government, informed. There's some level of an Indian desk. They don't call it that anymore.
No,
that's a
we
modest.
Call them maybe liaisons or advisors.
Intergovernmental, you know,
intergovernmental affairs, but truly strong advisors with the lived experience from those communities.
And I'll give you an example in real life time now. The Esther Martinez was a modest legislative initiative that was from the immersion schools, who, just like the tribal colleges once upon a time, had no formula funding. They had no consistent funding. They were completely supported by foundations. And if they hadn't got the Tribal College Act through, which was supported too by ANA and OEO, but if they had not gotten that through, they would have fallen apart. Wow. And the idea with the native languages, there's all these community-based schools, nonprofits, tribally run schools with no funding. They were scrapping it together and trying to do something, then competing with the 560 some tribes at the time. And over, you know, what are they going to get? And the idea was to take care of them through criteria that had just a few eligible communities, which was the amount of hours in the heritage language that you would do instruction. But what grew from there, and the success of ANA in administering that statute, was now we look over in Indian Affairs, they have the Living Languages program.
I love that. We're good complements, aren't we?
Exactly. We look over at the Bureau of Indian Education. They have an immersion program. We have a new statute in the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Indian Education has an immersion program across the street here in Department of Ed. We're looking yesterday at NCI, all various programs were naming their language initiatives from Department of Transportation.
It's so exciting. It gives us chills, right?
Yes. So we've arrived. The sad part of it, however, is we're at an all-time in the history of Indian country since Creator put Indian people on this earth in the amount of language speakers we have and cultural bearers, and we have to be careful, you know, to really focus on the communities that are really serious about it and still have that resource. But it's that come from ANA and that legislative effort, and this is the counterbalance that a lot of people, it's a nuance in politics and policy, but what you guys do drives innovation all around the federal government and out in Indian country.
Yes. I hope so. I hope we're spurring more, because so much more is needed. And I'm reminded often of how many first language speakers we lost during COVID. And those, our elders, they were our teachers. Maybe they didn't write it, but they spoke it. And in speaking it, they told us the stories and the ceremonies and the songs. And I think that's something we'll never be able to recapture. So it's such an incredibly urgent, critically urgent need in Indian country.
Mm-hmm. I haven't allowed myself to even think about that because it's so profound what we lost. And if we were to quantify that or try to describe it or articulate it, we would have a breakdown just of spirit. And
weeping.
But you lose one elder, you've lost all those stories and everything, and their family kinship, how they knew it, what they knew. And I'm so glad you brought up, you know, like Dr. Jim, but these stories, both here in politics and policy and out in cultural areas and language, they float around without ownership, and then when they're gone, you don't have that anymore as well. So on the Wind River Indian Reservation, we just lost one of my teachers a couple weeks ago, and I could barely stop crying, you know, and it just felt so bad. It was like it was like they are irreplaceable, and you only have so much time.
Right.
And this is what tribal communities have to really figure out, because it's not rhetoric or hyperbole. We're in the last minute of the final hour, and maybe not in some communities in the Southwest, but in the rest of the country, of really, how are we going to do this? And this fierce sense of urgency, it can't be exaggerated. It's real. And so when we see people fiddling it away or making it political, or we don't write our grants right and we don't get funded, there's a huge sense of anxiety and emotions, and you know, how are we going to do this?
I feel that anxiety at ANA. I wish we had 3 times, 4 times as much money to deliver into Indian communities, but it is desperately needed, and the investment in language preservation and revitalization is going to take so much. We talked a little bit about the language teachers and the immersion, adult immersion, that really is, it's a mindset, it's a way of living that would take an enormous amount of resources and support. I do think NCAI has actually declared a state of emergency on Native languages, and I hope that that call to action is going to resonate in Congress and with tribes. It was beautiful to see the Pueblo leaders yesterday, all understanding and being able to respond and communicate. I wish I could do that in Lakota. I just have a few words left from my grandfather. What's the word for sweet? And chanhupi in Lakota. But he used to call my mother that, and I think it was his way of saying sweetheart or something like that.
Chante shkuya.
Skuyapi.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
See, I need a language. I need language every day to support that.
Well, could I interrupt you?
Oh, absolutely.
Those people down there in those pueblos, and not all the pueblos anymore, and they're right a line on Interstate 25. A lot of them have casinos. They're close to urban center.
Yep.
You would think they would be inundated by mainstream around them and to acquiesce to those norms. They're some of the most resilient communities in the entire country, of any people, let alone Indian country. And their social control, their traditional governments, and the fact that they still believe their children belong to Creator, and they're responsible for them to teach their language, where they don't even teach them English in some of those communities until they're of age. So it's a community decision, so hard to emulate anywhere else. They live together.
Because immersion is the community.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's really these small enclaves that are left elsewhere, they're the ones that need the key investments to keep that going, you know, but I'm just using them as an example.
They're beautiful. I love it. I just absolutely love it. As tribes fight to save their languages, has the federal government done enough? And I say that in the context of it really was the federal government who drove the extinction of Native languages, especially through boarding schools and the breakup of, the intentional breakup of families.
The whole design was, as we all know, but I'll reiterate it, and I'm not trying to patronize anybody, but the whole design was to separate the child not just from his parents. That was just one aspect of it, but it was from his religions, his ceremonies, his spiritual way of knowing. So this is where your colleagues really missed it over in Interior. They have to talk about religion sometimes, and the federal government people are really reluctant to do that. However, because we have the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, that should be really the impetus for people to talk about religion. They attacked the religions. To get to that, you have to take language away, because that's our connection to the land, to our medicines, to our holy people and Creator. And that was what it was about. And so the whole boarding school thing, to me, it doesn't work until they really get to the core. We have to also create religious revitalization through language too, and to have that, so we have that form of communication. But that's what they wanted to do. And I've always said this country owes the Indian people a commensurate investment in revitalization that they used to destroy it. So those should be equals. And yes, we're not even close.
No, we're not.
We're not even close.
No.
And I get demoralized when I think about this unholy alliance between church and state that was used with these boarding schools and carving up reservations and assigning denominations to different ones that they invested in these churches. And then here, a lot of us are over here still trying to practice our way of life, and there's all kinds of challenges. Medicine access, sacred site access. And the federal government says, oh, we can't touch that. That's establishing a religion, you know, but yet they made all those investments way back there to do that. So what we did with Native American Languages Act, with Esther Martinez, it was that you have a federal trust responsibility to defend these languages and to invest in them. Within the federal trust corpus and measurable standards, the trust responsibility, Native languages are in there now. Nobody ever used that vernacular before. It's
That's
real,
a trust
though.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so it's happening. But as that's happening, our resource of speakers is,
I know.
We're incongruent with what time is left.
The
and
inverse relationship to the effort needed. And well, one of the things that the federal government has done is charged ANA, this little tiny agency, grant making agency, to conduct a national survey of Native languages. And so for the first time ever, there will be some systematic collection of information about how many languages are spoken, what's the proficiency level of these languages, and whether they're oral, written, what have you. And I'm a bit concerned, some anxiety about whether or not we're going to get it right, because the backdrop of this survey is all the destructive policies, right? The insidious ways that language has been removed, eliminated, you know, taken out of Native communities. So now here we have the responsibility to do this national survey. Some part of it, I mean, feels a little extractive, but another part of it is all about what do we need to do to make investments so that we can maintain and capture and not just preserve language, but revitalize them. What advice would you have to us about how we proceed to share this survey, to get responses sufficient enough so that we can make intelligent recommendations to Congress on the resources needed?
I think to start with, there's not going to be one methodology that's going to work because these tribes are diverse also. So you go someplace like Navajo Nation, where educators have told me, and this is our largest tribe in America, and sorry Cherokee people, but they can barely find a child coming into kindergarten that's fluent anymore in the Dene language. You yet they have tens of thousands of speakers in their membership. You say rate of proficiency.
Right.
You go take somebody 50 and up, it's almost 90%. So really it's a precursor to they're just as vulnerable as the rest of us down the road.
Right.
And we had that in a lot of communities I was working with, almost an arrogance because we had so many speakers. But they were all the same age. So
a cohort.
Yeah.
And they spoke to each other.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have an auntie who speaks Lakota to another auntie in Dakota.
Yeah.
And they just love it. They tell jokes, they gossip, you know, what have you. And it's like, I just wish I knew. I could understand.
It's still comforting though, even if you don't
It
understand.
is, very much so.
But so for the survey, I don't envy you. I want to help, but it's really hard because what's the incentive, you know, for the communities to participate in it? And I worked with a lot of communities out in California, especially the northern part. No speakers left. They're trying to use microfilm and field notes, recordings, and they're intensely driven and working at this and piecing it back together. But what is the survey how are they gonna answer that?
Exactly.
They're trying harder than a lot of other communities that have speakers because they take them for granted that they still have speakers.
Right.
But everyone's in the same boat on so far as this resource that's left. But how are you going to extrapolate that information from them? How do they trust ANA?
Right.
What is the carrot and stick for them to participate?
Yes,
you know, how do you do that?
We want to do it in an honorable, respectful way.
And for tribes, do they want to really look in the mirror and often they conceal their true circumstances from themselves. And I say that as someone who cherishes Indian country, but I just say it how it is. It's true. We don't want to say we got 20 speakers left. We want to say we have 200 speakers left. You know, there might be an uncle that knows a few words, and that's one of our speakers. You know, but we're getting to a point, and this is what's sad is, anytime you do an event on our reservations, people are scrambling around now to find someone to go pray in our language.
Oh my gosh.
If somebody wants to name a child, they're scrambling around now to go find somebody that understands that and can do that ceremony. If they want to do something, you know, there's just a few people in these communities that really have that knowledge that's left. And so we're hanging on by the slenderest of threads. Is that survey, how is that going to serve that? How is it going to tell that story? How are we going to, but I told in the task force meeting yesterday, I said, I respect the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and they valued this. They wanted this survey.
Absolutely.
So I feel like it's our duty to reciprocate Chairman Schatz and Murkowski and the ones, we have a moral obligation to defend what they felt was a priority in a statute.
I love the way you're saying that, Ryan, because it's another opportunity. I'm hoping that we can have a groundswell response to this, to say, this is dire, it's so critical, we need the support, and that if we don't get it, as you said, the clock is ticking. You know, that the sands are going through, and we're just have a few sands left in the hourglass to hold on to our precious languages, but languages relating to identity and culture with sovereignty, and sovereignty meaning, you know, our government, the way of being, our life ways.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Well, I just have one more thought for you, or one more question. What would you say would be the most consequential thing that we could do right now to save Native languages?
You're talking about ANA or the?
Well, I want to think big. We're a part of a bigger cog, as you notice. You mentioned the Department of Education, the Department of the Interior. But if we could say Indian country one and the federal government for another.
I would put it this way. You know, and again, going back to Dr. Jim, he was receiving proposals from tribes that were written on paper by, you know, number 2 pencils. This was how humble we were, you know, back then. They didn't have fancy grant writers. They didn't have all of this. So as I've analyzed it, I think we have to get out to Indian country. And I heard that the tribal government coordinator for Department of Transportation offered his cell phone yesterday. And he said, for roads and this and that, I will help you. We will find it. We will work together. What I would like to see is, whether the survey comes through or not in a way that's going to be revealing, we do know there's communities out there that have not put good grants forward, but they need the support.
They do, absolutely.
And so one of the things they did back in the day, they used the universities for technical assistance trainings. They had them regionalized. But I would say, let's, under the laws that are permissible, let's really get out to Indian country, some of these communities that haven't benefited from these resources, and help them write proposals that can be funded. Yeah, and maybe that's giving them, whether they ask for it or not, a planning grant. You know, or calling them up and saying that,
play the system.
And you know, hosting planning sessions with them, you know, and letting them know. And we had a lot of money in the room yesterday.
Oh my goodness.
You know, in that task force meeting. And that was the thing. I felt like my job is not to tell people how to save their languages, but here's where the resources are. Here's what we fought for on Capitol Hill, so there'd be resources for you guys. And here's where you go. But come out. I was teasing my older sister because I never knew she was part Crow. She was the co-chair of the task force, and she was talking in Lakota and saying that. And but those are some of my favorite people, even though they're our traditional enemies. But I'm adopted out there. They need help out there.
Right.
Pine Ridge, Wind River, Northern Cheyenne, you know, Rocky Boy. There's these pockets that really have a good enthusiasm, but they haven't had the help. And of course, I'm biased towards the Northern Plains, but I mean, they haven't, you know, hit on these, and they haven't done the community planning, you know, with support.
Well, I'm really hoping that our new, you know, revised grant process is going to make it much more accessible to tribes that never been to ANA, that we can extend our reach, extend our impact, be catalysts for those communities to really spread the work, the capacity, the teachers. You teach one, you can teach so many, right? Well, I can't thank you enough for coming in to HHS, the Health and Human Services Department, to have this conversation today. It's I always learn from you, Ryan. I'm just so just eager to absorb more and more of what you've done, what you've learned through along the way. And I didn't actually bring ANA back to President Kennedy, so I think that's a new starting point for us. We know about the war on poverty and OAO, but I love the idea that the seeds were planted even before that, and we're still growing strong. I think we're like a sequoia tree, you know, very tall, very strong, resilient in our own way, but still providing, you know, tremendous benefits.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor.
So Bopila.
Yes, thank you.
Celebrating 50 years of ANA. Conversations on the past, present, and future of self-determination. Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.